Good afternoon, folks. I am weirdly excited to be doing this video, considering my known opinions on the Space Wolves. I will be getting into a mini rant later, but this isn't for now. For now, I want to talk about this awesome Legion and why, if you like them, I have a complete and utter, completely fine guys with that. You guys go for it, right? There are many reasons why I'm not that big on the Space Wolves. As I said, I'm going to get to that later on. But first of all, I think it's good to go through the lore of the Space Wolves and just talk in a little bit. You know how I like to do this? I like to chill out at my desk and reminisce about the hobby a little bit. And I think literally me reading through the lore and giving my opinion on it is the best way to do that. As you can see through the Legion videos, we're getting more and more onto what the forms that these videos are going to take. Now, obviously, we did the what did we do last time? Yeah, so we're due to do the White Scars next. I know that's going to be out of sync because I wanted to do a big video on the White Scars because they're one of my favourites. We did the Iron Warriors last time, which I really liked, but I wanted to just get the Space Wolves on here because I think they show a really good contrast to the White Scars themselves. So, the Space Wolves. So they are led, or they were led, by a Primarch known as Leman Russ. And if anybody knows who Leman Russ is, essentially imagine the greatest, largest Viking that you can, inject him with steroids, and give him a raging arrogance complex, and you basically got Leman Russ, essentially. Fenris itself as a world, Fenris being the Roman word for wolf, or little wolf, it is a harsh, cold world. Basically, imagine Nordic Valhalla in planet form is essentially what Fenris is. It is a harsh, cold place. It is somewhere that life clings to very precariously at times. And it is on this world that Leman Russ not only was born to or landed on through his gestation capsule, but he thrived, becoming the Wolf King of Fenris, becoming quite possibly the greatest king that ever ruled the planet. But let's be honest, he is the greatest king who ever ruled that planet. Okay? So, in terms of power level, I really respect Leman Russ because at the end of the day, I'm going to read this bit of lore that I found about his youth. And then we're going to go into the character of Leman Russ and who he actually was. So, when the Primarchs were spread throughout the galaxy by the forces of chaos, one came to land in the far northwest of the galaxy on a remote ice world named Fenris. He was adopted by the Fenrisian she-wolf and raised among the wolves, and his two wolf brothers, Freki and Geri. One harsh winter, the wolves attacked a village and stormed the food storage facilities. The villagers fought off the wolves, but Leman Russ fought them off so viciously that all of his brothers escaped alive. Thengir, king of the people of the Russ, sent a raiding party of hunters and villagers to remove this menace for good, with poisoned arrows and knives sharp enough to slice through oak. Alright? So this is a world full of Nordic barbarians, essentially. The raiding party killed many members of the pack, including the she-wolf and one of his wolf brothers. Leman Russ was shot so many times, and then captured and brought, bound and gagged before King Thengir. Leman Russ proved himself to be more than just another wolf, and was eventually taken in by the king himself. Among men for the first time, Leman quickly learned their skills, showing a natural aptitude for the way of the warrior. He learned to speak and mastered their weapons, iron axes and swords. He was also quick to roar with laughter or sing tunelessly, and he slowly realised that he was more human than wolf, but superior to both. That's very intrinsic to Leman Russ. He does feel he's superior. Eventually, Leman Russ became sufficiently civilized to warrant a true name. The king named him Leman, or Lemon, Leman of the Russ. Later in his life, he is said to have been able to turn back whole armies of the king's enemies by himself without a scratch. to tear whole oak trees from the ground and snap them over his back, and to wrestle Fenrisian mammoths to the ground. When King Thengir died, there was no question as to who should succeed him. Therefore, King Leman Russ took to the throne. He was said to have been the best leader. No one could stand against him, and it was not so long before the tales of him came to the Emperor's notice. The Emperor recognised this figure as a Primarch and travelled to Fenris. He entered Rus's court, cloaked in runes of disguise and confusion. The natives shrunk from this new presence. Rus refused to pay him homage as the master of mankind. Rus challenged the Emperor to a series of tests. The first challenge was an eating one. This the Emperor lost. The second challenge was a drinking one. This the Emperor also failed. For the third challenge, Rus boasted he could defeat the Emperor in combat. This time, after hours of intense brawling, the Emperor eventually defeated Rus, felling him with a blow from his mighty power glove. Lemon admitted defeat and swore to serve the Emperor. The first of his brother Primarchs he met was Horus, at this time the only other of the Emperor's sons discovered. Rus learned Gothic in just a few days, and recognised Horus's jealousy and disdain for his savage ways. Despite this, Rus expressed a desire for friendship, and wanted to brawl with his brother. Just weeks later, Rus was placed at the head of his lone legion, named the Space Wolves, and joined the Great Crusade. He was armed with a thrice-blessed suit of power armour, and a new sword forged from the maw of the great Kraken Gomenjarl, and reputably the blade could cleave the ice mountain of Fenris in half. So, that is the starting tale of Leman Russ. But I want to go into what happened during the Great Crusade, because Russ has a very prodigious record in the Great Crusades. In fact, it's I think he's third only to Horus and the Lion in terms of his victories in the battlefield during the Great Crusade, which is quite a thing considering, but not so much a great thing when you realise that he'd been there longer than the Lion. You know, he'd been around longer than the Lion. But anyway, one thing that I really like that Leman Russ actually did was when he was told to bring Angron to heel, who is somebody else that we saw Perturabo beating up in our last video. He actually did something very similar to Perturabo in that he isolated Angron from his men as he was raging. Just isolated him from his men and surrounded him with Space Wolves to the point where Angron had to stand down or he was going to be mowed down by, you know, what Angron would see as dishonourable, but whatever, amassed fire from bolters from all of the Space Wolves. Which shows, I think that's a really key thing for Leman Russ, in that it shows his different scope towards Angron. I think that scene was actually really needed, considering Angron is a berserker, he's very angry, he's very annoyed most of the time. And to be honest, so is Leman Russ. There are a lot of parallels there between Angron and Leman Russ. And so I think the scene where Leman Russ uses his brain and actually outwits Angron into nearly killing himself is extremely important. So here's the bit I wanted to read. Later, when Angron refused to end the Butcher's Nail surgery on his World Eater's Legion, which we'll get to when we get to Angron, of course, the Emperor dispatched Russ and his wolves to Malkoya to bring Angron back to Terra to answer for his insubordination. However, what resulted was a brief but bloody clash between the World Eaters and Space Wolves, and Russ engaged Angron himself in single combat. In the duel, Russ held back and was defeated by the Red Angel. Russ's true stratagem soon became apparent when it was revealed that Angron had allowed himself to be encircled by Space Wolves by the Space Wolves' forces during the duel. Russ tried to convince Angron to stand down, explaining to him that while he had bested him in single combat, Angron was nonetheless trapped, and this was the result of his own bloodlust and failure to lead his legion. Infuriated, Angron refused to stand down, and Russ sadly realised his brother was a lost cause. With a howl, Russ ordered the Space Wolves to withdraw. Russ later clashed with another of his brothers on the Great Crusade, this time almost coming to blows with Magnus the Red over the fate of the Great Library of Archreach Secundus. Okay, so now we're going to get into what I think is the more, how do I put it, controversial side to the Space Wolves and of Leman Russ, in that Leman Russ is designated as the Emperor's executioner. So whenever we see a Primarch leaving the bounds of his authority, whenever we see a Primarch perhaps turning against the Emperor's will, it is Lemon Russ who is often dispatched to bring him back in line, or chop his head off if he's not going to fall in line. Now, again, I will get into why I think this is kind of silly later on, and sort of defeats the purpose of the Primarchs, but the Emperor's Executioner thing is something that has gone on for quite a few years, and probably since the start of lore itself. But it's not something that I particularly agree with, because the one time we see it happen and Lemon Russ succeeds, he has help. When he goes after the Thousand Sons and Magnus the Red at the burning of Prospero, Magnus doesn't fight back. In fact, he orders his legion to fight back and actually sabotages his own legion for a long, long time during that battle, which means that the Space Wolves have a very easy time conquering and destroying the world of the city of Tisca, right? And so I think that the whole Emperor's Executioner sort of a thing rings a bit hollow to me, because we only see him doing it once, and even then it's not very convincing, and he has a lot of help. I think later on, yes, we do get it seen that Lemon Russ hints at the fact that he may have been the one to destroy the 2 legions that went rogue, or that were the 2nd and the 11th Legion, the ones that disappeared from Imperial record. He did come out and say, look, it's not unprecedented that like the rout, his army is called upon to get rid of another legion. That's happened before, right? He said that before. But we know Lemon Russ is a braggart, and we know Lemon Russ talks himself up a lot. We know that's what he does, right? That he's a storyteller, and he tends to sing and clap and do all of these other things that he wants to do. So moving on to the Horus Heresy. In the Horus Heresy, Lemon Russ doesn't do that much. In fact, he does make it to Terra. And this is one of the main things that gives me a problem with Lemon Russ and with the Space Wolves in general. In that I firmly believe that if Lemon Russ was on Terra during the end game of the Horus Heresy, the result would have been very, very different. If the entire Space Wolves Legion was there, even not on the planet but in orbit, hunting down traitor ships and boarding like suicide runs, I don't think Horus would have made it to Terra with like a fraction of his forces left, such as my respect for the Space Wolves and for Lemon Russ, right? So this isn't coming from a place of I hate Lemon Russ. No, it's not. Like, I fully respect the capabilities of the Space Wolves, and I fully respect the capabilities of Lemon Russ, to the point that I know, let's be honest, if he was at the Siege of Terra or anywhere near the Sol System when Horus was there, the result would have been very, very different, and I think Horus would have lost the battle way before Percherob had a chance to win it for him. So, Lemon Russ decides not to do that, despite being asked by Malcador the Sigillite to stay. And by the way, the people should be doing what Malcador the Sigillite says, because he's basically the voice of the Emperor. 1 second, let me just take a little drink here, because this might be a very shouty video. There we go. So, yeah, Malcador the Sigillite is a character that should be listened to by essentially every Primarch going, because he is the voice of the Emperor. And the fact that he asks Lemon Russ to stay on the planet to defend it against Horus, who's coming in. He says, look, we need you here. And Lemon Russ says, that's not how I fight. I'm going to go take the fight to him on my own. Yeah, if that sounds stupid, yeah, it is. It's very stupid. And he goes off and does it anyway. He actually goes after and fights Horus. And it looks like their mission is going to succeed. This is another part that really annoys me about reading the books in the Horus Heresy. It looks like these guys, that this strike team, is actually going to be able to kill Horus. Like, they have him cornered, and he's not super powered by the Dark God yet. They've got him, and they're about to kill him. That's when Lemon Russ decides to go rogue and go after him himself. He gets basically everybody on that mission killed, apart from 2 named characters. And also, he fails to kill Horus. He wounds him, but fails to kill him. So he So he fails, essentially. And then he doesn't make it back to Terra. So that is my huge problem with Lemon Russ, is that the only fault that he has is he's too badass, right? Every single other Legion has a serious flaw or fault, right? Every single one of them has a fault. Even the Ultramarines have a fault that limits their potential in some way, right? I don't think Lemon Russ actually has any. The only fault he has is that he's too headstrong, quote unquote, and too badass, quote unquote. He tends to get away with things that a Primarch should not be getting away with. You should not be able to go to the heart of the Vengeful Spirit itself and wound Horus and get away with it, right? There should be no way of doing that at this stage. But of course, it's Lemon Russ, you know? And we're gonna get in a minute to why I think my problems with the Space Wolves going forwards. But let me just read about the Horus Heresy, just so we can put it into context. So, many years passed and many more battles. Essentially. Thousands of worlds were reclaimed by the Imperium, but eventually, the Golden Age came to an end. The Emperor sent Lemon Russ and his Space Wolves to deal with Magnus the Red and the Thousand Sons Legion, who the Emperor believed to be the true heretics. Magnus had used sorcery to warn the Emperor of Horus after being told not to, and nearly ruining his secret project, the Webway project, which we will get into at a later date. Seeking to either eliminate or return Magnus. Sorry, this wiki is really badly written, so I'm just going to ignore it from now on. So essentially, Horus gets a hold of Lemon Russ, and by this time, let us not forget that Magnus has already said that Horus is a traitor to the Imperium, right? He's the first one to find out that Horus is betraying the Emperor. And so Lemon Russ knows at this point that Horus has been accused of treachery by Magnus the Red. But the Emperor's thinking, no, Magnus the Red's the traitor, so go and bring him to me, please. Don't kill him, bring him to me. Bring him to me. Right? It's very important, because I need him to sit on this golden throne thing, right? So bring him to me alive. Cool. Off he goes. He meets Horus, and instead of being immediately suspicious of Horus, Horus says, oh, actually, the Emperor told me that the orders have changed, and you now have to kill everybody on the planet. You now have to kill Magnus the Red and all those people, right? And instead of questioning this, instead of engaging his brain, Lemon Russ goes straight down and annihilates the Thousand Sons. In fact, he completely doesn't understand that the Thousand Sons are being sabotaged by their own Primarch, and that's why it's so easy. He just thinks he's that great and amazing that he's just going in there and annihilating everybody, right? And I just don't understand where a character like that gets off, like being like, well, I'm the Emperor's executioner. No, you're clearly not the Emperor's executioner. You're a terrible executioner, because you're not even executing the right people. And even then, you need help, right? So let's get away from that tag of the Emperor's executioner. I don't think it works. I honestly don't think it works. So, right. Now, does this mean that I do not like the Space Wolves as a force? Do I think they've got any merit? No, I definitely do. I completely respect the capabilities of the Space Wolves and the capabilities of Lemon Russ. But I just think if there is one flaw that the Space Wolves have, it's just Lemon Russ. And it's his willingness to go on his own and do his own thing and not listen to anybody, right? In fact, when he does listen to somebody, Horus, he ruins everything for everybody, right? And that is his flaw. But the Space Wolves themselves don't really have a flaw, which I will get into a bit later on. And yes, I do mean the Wolfen isn't really a flaw. I'm going to get into that later on. So, right. We've gone over what Lemon Russ does during the Horus Heresy, okay? So, here we go. Let me just have a look here. So, after returning to Terra, Russ was changed. He challenged the wisdom of the Emperor openly and expressed regret for being manipulated into destroying Prospero. There we go, right? Thinking that it was his destiny, to deal with Horus personally, Russ eventually led the wolves out of Terra to try and engage the War Master despite disagreement from Rogel, Dawn and Sanguinius, who wished him to remain for the coming siege. Again, he comes home and says, "That was silly. I didn't listen to anybody. I took it upon myself to go after the Thousand Sons because Horus manipulated me. And yes, so I'm going to respond to that by not listening to anybody and not taking any advice and going after Horus myself." So Russ eventually led the wolves out from Terra to try and engage the War Master despite disagreement from Rogel, Dawn and Sanguinius. Thanks to the efforts of the Knights Errant during the Battle of Molech, Russ was able to track the location of the Vengeful Spirit in order to confront Horus directly. Before moving on Horus, however, he returned to Fenris to conduct a ritual with his rune priest to try and ascertain a weakness in the War Master. The ritual, overseen by Kavar, Bjorn, and 7 other rune priests, saw Russ enter the Underverse through the volcanic cavern known as Satir's Door. Within the Underverse, I think the Underverse is the warp, is it not? Yeah, it is the warp. Russ entered the hall of the Earl King, a warp entity that collects the Fenrisian souls which die outside of battle. Russ was about to be consumed by the Earl King's hordes of Wolfen when he offered to complete 4 challenges in exchange for his soul. The Earl King accepted and challenged him to drink the damned souls of Amrok's bowl dry, next wrestle an old crone, and finally move the Earl King's great sleeping wolf. Russ failed in the first 3, and his soul rested on completing the 4th, which was to explain what the Earl King challenged him to complete. Alright? Russ revealed that the first challenge symbolised the changing of the seasons on Fenris. The old woman represented the inevitability of age, the unmovable wolf, inescapable death. The hall crumbled, replaced by a finely dressed, civilised version of Russ that was revealed to be his fate had he never landed upon Fenris. Alright, very, very interesting. Very interesting. So, this Russ revealed the nature of the spear, that it held a portion of the Emperor's power and could illuminate the truth to those it pierced. With that, the false Russ impaled the Wolf King, revealing to him the truth regarding the nature of the Primarchs. Russ despaired, and the false Russ revealed that his knowledge would one day see him leave Fenris. Nonetheless, Russ had gotten what he was looking for, and he understood that the spear of Russ could not only wound Horus, but change the course of the war. Alright. Russ emerged from Satir's Door with Bjorn and the only surviving member of his retinue, or as the only surviving member of his retinue. He announced his intention to confront Horus despite it being suicidal. He allowed his wolf lords to decide if they would follow him or not, but none refused. Using the runes placed aboard the vessel by the Knights Errant at Molech, the Space Wolves first ambushed the Vengeful Spirit as it docked over Trilosian or Trisolian A4. A vicious battle erupted between the 2 armadas, and Russ boarded the Vengeful Spirit and confronted Horus himself. Russ was disgusted with what had become of his brother, and unsurprisingly rejected his offer to join him in overthrowing the Emperor. The 2 engaged in a titanic duel, which Russ deliberately allowing himself to be wounded by Horus's lightning claw to create an opening to impale the treacherous War Master with the spear of Russ. However, Russ hesitated to strike down his brother for a second, allowing Huss to deflect some of the blow and turn a fatal strike into a wounding one. Oh, Russ, for God's sake. Again, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, it seems. Nonetheless, Horus was grievously injured, and more importantly, the power of the spear cleaned him of the corruption that he had suffered since Molech, faced not only by a creature of chaos, but by Horus Lupercal. Alright. Russ again engaged his brother in battle, while this time he was badly injured. But before Horus could land the fatal blow, hundreds of Space Wolves swarmed the War Master and gave Bjorn and Grimnir Blackboard time to drag the barely unconscious Primarch back to his ship to flee. After the fight with Horus, the badly wounded Russ fell into a comatose state. Abaddon pursued the depleted Space Wolves to Yarant, where he besieged them. Russ awoke only when Korax arrived with the Raven Guard, awake long enough to greet the Raven Lord and give Bjorn the spear of Russ. In the end, the Space Wolves were able to evacuate Yarant with Korax's aid, but Rus remained unconscious. Alright, so Rus was not known to be present during the Siege of Terra, and the Emperor was entombed upon the Golden Throne. Upon his arrival to Terra, the discovery of what had happened, Lemon Rus became distraught and verbally clashed with Constantine Valdor, who suggested that the events had transpired as the Emperor had planned. When the newly appointed Lord Commander of the Imperium, Rabute Guilliman, tried to reorganise legionaries Astartes into chapters, based along his new Codex Astartes, Lemon Rus protested heavily and sided with the Imperial Fist during the Codex crisis. Ultimately, the Space Wolves would heavily deviate from the Codex Astartes, and their only successor chapter became the ill-fated Wolf Brothers. Okay? I think that's because Lemon Rus pretty much knew that his gene seed was really unstable. So if he did that, his chapter would have just died. Right. Rus eventually, a few hundred years later, at a great feast with his legion and attendants, stood and said, "In the end I will return for the final battle, for the Wolf Time." He then left the Fang and embarked into the Eye of Terror, accompanied by his personal retinue, bar one, Bjorn the Fell-Handed, who remained unfenris in the role of Great Wolf. The tale of his disappearance is retold every 1,000 years by Bjorn, now the oldest dreadnought alive. Every once in a while, the Space Wolves embark on what is called the Great Hunt, to search the galaxy for their missing leader. Though they have searched far and wide, they still haven't found any sign of their Primarch. Many within the Space Wolves believe that Rus has sought out the Tree of Life to restore the Emperor to health, which is a thing from Nordic mythology. Yggdrasil is the Tree of Life, which is said to be able to... Oh, here we go. Yes, fabled tree of unimaginable power. There you go. Okie dokie. Okie dokie. Apparently, the Wolf Primarch's arch nemesis Magnus knows the Wolf King's whereabouts, but keeps it secret. Right. So, that is Lemon Rus. So as you can see, he doesn't arrive at the Siege of Terror at all. He's not involved. Which, for me, is a big, big shame. Because I think, if he'd have just listened to people, he could have turned the entire tide of the war. What he did was very brave and very stupid. But it is, is a very Space Wolf thing to do. So, going into the Space Wolves themselves, the Space Wolves deviate from the Codex Astartes, which for me is no bad thing in itself. I think the Codex Astartes is pretty much an outdated and useless piece of Guilliman-ite propaganda, right? I don't think it works very well, especially with the coming of the Great Rift. I honestly do not think it works very well. But anyway, the Space Wolves have been at the centre of quite a few large moments of Imperial history after the Siege of Terra. One of which was their clash with the Grey Knights in the aftermath of the War for Armageddon, where the Grey Knights sought to kill anyone even suspected of being tainted by demonic influence. And, of course, the Space Wolves didn't like this, and said, they fought well, and they fought honourably, and this and that and the other. They don't see the big picture. Again, it's the main flaw of the Space Wolves, if there ever is one, is that they're very prideful, and they don't see the big picture. In fact, they kill a Grey Knight's chapter master. Now, here I'm going to get into what I think... the main reason I have a problem with the Space Wolves. The very main reason. The lore of Warhammer 40,000, the lore of Warhammer in general, bends and breaks to accommodate the Space Wolves, not the other way around. Okay? The Space Wolves go after and kill a Grey Knight's Grand Master and several Inquisitors. Several of them. And nothing happens. There is a tent standoff, there is a battle, there is a tent standoff, and then everyone is given a slap on the wrist and they go their own ways, essentially. Right? No penance crusade, nothing. No punishment. Nothing. Let me just rewind to the tale of the Soul Drinkers. The Soul Drinkers destroyed one Adeptus Mechanicus ship. One. And they were declared traitors. They were declared traitors. They were literally banished from the Imperium. Excommunicati traitoris, right? That was it. They were done. So this is what I mean. The law bends to accommodate the Space Wolves doing cool shit. And I really cannot stand things in pieces of fiction that are so great, like Warhammer 40,000. The one reason why I love it so much as a medium is because it very rarely does this. It very rarely accommodates anybody. There are things that are possible and there are things that aren't possible. And if something previously wasn't possible but now it is, it is explained why now is different. They never explained it because they just felt, well, the Space Wolves are that badass that they just get away with it. That's it. It's fine. And I honestly do not see the point. I honestly think that it should be. Honestly, they should have had some sort of penance crusade or something like that to because not only do they kill several Inquisitors, for fuck's sake. Like, it's literally breaking a core tenet of the law, LORE, the law of Warhammer 40,000, and they just get away with it. You know, it's fine. They do get one punishment, and that Magnus the Red comes back and annihilates much of Fenris, which, you know, something that to me was pretty much swept under the rug. It happened in 8th edition. At the start or the end of 7th the end of 7th and the start of 8th. But it is these days almost wholly, the same as what it was. I know people will say, well, no, Magnus has spread a lot of demonic taint there. That's only served to make the Space Wolves stronger, because now they have demons to fight on Fenris. They can train against demons, and they're going to be even stronger now, right? The only flaw the Space Wolves have is the Wolfen. And what flaw is that? Well, it means that they turn into werewolves. Really? Is that a flaw? Is that a flaw? Like, do they get even bigger and stronger? Okay, fine. I don't see it as a flaw. I think that's a really cool aesthetic that they have, right? So, I think with everybody else, they have a fatal flaw. You have the Dark Angels, and you have who are very you have the Fallen. So we have the Blood Angels, which have obviously the Black Rage and the Red Thirst. We have the Ultramarines, who are really, really, really single-minded in terms of tactics, to the point that before Guilliman came back, they were losing more than they were winning, because they had to stick to the Codex Astartes, and very rarely did they have the wherewithal to operate beyond it, right? Only when Guilliman is present do they veer and deviate from the Codex Astartes. And so now they're starting to do that, but still, it's a very hard process. You have all of these different chapters with their own flaws, you know? I think the only one that you could say doesn't really have a flaw, probably the Imperial Fists, right? But even then, the Imperial Fists have other things. Their successor chapters, their flaws, their successor chapters are cooler and more famous than the actual Imperial Fists, right? So the Crimson Fist, the Black Templars, and people like that, they're actually more famous than the actual Imperial Fist, which I think is their flaw, which is hilarious. So the only one that the Space Wolves have is that they have the Wolfen, which to me is absolutely amazing. It's really, really cool. Now, I much prefer the look of the pre-Heresy Space Wolves, and I really, really, really wish that Games Workshop had stuck to that and made them this really dark grey and red, foreboding, fur-caked legion. I really wish that if you're going to be independent, as Lemon Russ wanted you to be, have the Space Wolves still be a legion, right? Still be, say, their numbers have really gone down because of the Horus Heresy, and when Lemon Russ went away, a lot of them started becoming Wolfen and going into the Eye of Terror. So now we have maybe 5,000 Space Wolves, 5 to 10,000 Space Wolves, and they actually class themselves as a legion, not a chapter, because they don't have any descendants, because the gene seed is so unstable. That would be so cool, but they don't do that. They're a chapter just like everyone else. They're just not adherent to the Codex Astartes because they have great companies and things like that. They do have descendants now, of course, with the Horus Marines and things like that, which, a lot of people are pointed to say, look, that they're obviously not real Space Wolves, because real Space Wolves can't really have successors, because their gene seed is that warped and not really usable. But in terms of the Space Wolves, that's my main issue with them. My main issue with them is that, quite frankly, the law bends it breaks its own back to accommodate them. And I'm not a big fan. Like every single thing that they're supposed to be good at, they fail at. Right? The reason why I loved Perturabo's law so much is because even though he's a tragic figure and everything goes wrong for him, he succeeds at every single thing he sets out to do. And you can see what his skill is, what he's good at, right? The Space Wolves destroyed Prospero, but they had a huge helping hand in doing so. And for me, a legion should never be able to just destroy another legion. Again, the law breaking its own back to accommodate Lemon Russ and the Space Wolves, right? Because as far as we know, the 2nd and the 11th Legion were destroyed by Lemon Russ and the Space Wolves. Just easily, just like that, bang, just gone, right? And we see it again with Prospero. Even though there are mitigating circumstances, huge ones, because you know the Thousand Sons pretty much sabotage themselves and led by Ahriman and not Magnus the Red. He just destroys the Thousand Sons like it's nothing, and they act like it's nothing too. Like all those Space Wolves are like, aha, you know, we're doing this and we're self-righteous and we're doing this and that and the other. The Space Wolves are really fucking unlikable. They're really unlikable. Like, they really are. If you've read any of the Black Legion books, they come across as total douchebags, right? They just do. They don't listen to anyone. They don't listen to reason. They're just idiots. Like, every single time they turn up, they're morons. They're just big, powerful morons who ruin everything for everybody whenever they turn up. And, you know, whilst I really respect the capabilities of the Legion and then the chapter, and obviously Logan Grimnar and Ragnar Blackmane and, of course, Lemon Russ, whilst I really do respect them, I honestly think that Games Workshop have done them dirty. And what I mean by that is, I think the Wolf stuff and the Viking stuff is so on the nose that it naturally makes people's toes curl. When they think about the Space Wolves, you just roll your eyes going, oh, for God's sake, you know. It's a Legion for 5-year-olds, essentially. You know, like, you know, if they're ever going to bring out an action figure of a Primarch, it's going to be Lemon Russ, you know, that kind of a thing. He's so one-dimensional, so one-note, so I am Space Viking, that it really is a... He's not nuanced. The Space Wolves are not nuanced. They don't have any multiple layers. They are what they are. And I honestly think, and here's how I would change it. Here's how I would change it to make it more palatable. As we always do at the end of these videos, we're going to have a little while where I'm going to talk about what I would do. So, I would have Lemon Russ coming to a world that is more akin to Russia than Fenris. I would have it being this vast... The main powers of Fenris are these Russian voivododes, huge states, right, that are always at war with each other. And of course you've got the massive Nordic wastelands above them, and they all worship Nordic-type gods, without realising that the gods they're worshipping are the Chaos gods, the gods of Chaos. Because Fenris, in my retelling, is the Warhammer 40,000 version of the Realm of Chaos, right? So it's very much a place that is touched by the eye, and you know the Chaos gods have a big presence here, to the point that when the Emperor comes down and he finds Lemon Russ, who has united all the Voidvodes, and he's united everyone under a single ruler, he's very concerned that he might have to go and expunge another legion, because in this, Lemon Russ is not the Emperor's executioner, right? He's just Lemon Russ. The two legions are already long gone by the time Lemon Russ is found. And so he thinks, oh my god, I'm going to have to destroy another one. This is going to be terrible, right? And so he arrives on Fenris with the Dark Angels and Lionel Johnson, because Lionel Johnson in this canon is the second Primarch to be found after Horus Lupercal. So it makes it a lot more sense, and it makes a lot more sense that, you know, Lionel Johnson has more victories than Lemon Russ this way, and we're not taking away from Lemon Russ's glory that way, okay? So, when he gets to Lemon Russ is actually the paragon of the noble barbarian warrior. Essentially, Lemon Russ, in my setting, is Conan in space. He is a powerful warrior. He's not headstrong. He's very, very wise, and he's one of the only Primarchs to have an extensive inner council. Not like the Moraval or whatever. No. He has an entire council of hundreds of Space Wolves and hundreds of people from Fenris counselling him, telling him how he should rule and what he should do and things like that. Because he is extremely resistant to the temptations of chaos. In fact, he goes against... He literally kills greater demons long before greater demons are even known to be a thing. And this is why the Emperor keeps him at arm's length. Right? It's very important to this retelling. It keeps him at arm's length. He doesn't really want to... He always sends Lemon Russ to the far-flung edges of the Crusade with his warriors. Because he thinks, if these guys turn to Chaos, I'm going to need to keep them as far away from everybody else as possible so I can send the Custodes and the Dark Angels to deal with them, right? Because in this lore, Lionel Johnson is the Emperor's executioner, right? In my own opinion, he was always meant to be. That's why he has so many galaxy-ending weapons under his command, as in Lionel Johnson, right? So, Lemon Russ, it develops a sort of chip on his shoulder. You know, he doesn't really speak to many of his brothers. He doesn't have very many friends, if any at all. But his wolves out there ranging in the far dark, and they're fighting things that don't have any right to exist in the galaxy, right? They actually fight the forces of chaos. They go way deep into the eye, and they go around the eye and things like that, and they're fighting chaos, and they're holding it back from coming anywhere near Fenris and anywhere near the Imperium. Such as the force of the Space Wolves and the sheer amount of Space Wolves that are there, right? With Lemon Russ pounding the like it gets to the stage where, you know, the gods of chaos are literally like, we would rather have anybody but this guy here because they've tempted him so often and he's not interested. So that's why they go to Horus. Horus is their backup plan, because their original plan was to go after Lemon Russ, because Lemon Russ, they know if they charged him up with powers, he would annihilate the Emperor in 2 seconds. But no, they go after the backup plan, the second plan, that is Horus Lupercal, right? So, okay, so in this retelling, it is Lemon Russ who finds out that Horus is betraying the Emperor. And he finds that out because he kills a greater demon of Tzeentch, who tells him that Horus is going to betray the Emperor, right? And he gives him visions of Horus betraying the Emperor. But to a certain extent, Lemon Russ knows in his heart that it's true, that this is true. He can't tell why, but he just can't. There's something about him, like he's not being... There's no reason for this demon to lie to him now when he's about to expunge him from existence. It's like, this is strange. So he sends Bjorn to Terra to warn the Emperor. Say, look, this is happening. This is terrible. You know, I'm sure that there's an explanation for this, right? But this is what I've heard from the enemy whilst I'm in the Eye of Terror. This is terrible. You know, we need to sort this out. Horus has turned against you. You know, and of course the Emperor reacts in a bad way. He says, "Well, I don't trust Lemon Russ. You've been in the Eye of Terror all this time. I think this is a ruse because Horus is my greatest son." So he imprisons Bjorn and sends Lionel Johnson and the Dark Angels into the Eye. Or, not even the Eye, he sends them to Fenris. He sends them to Fenris to essentially bring back Lemon Russ in chains. To explain his you know, what he's been saying, and to explain, you know, why he's cavorting with demons, essentially. You know, why he's doing this sort of thing. Lemon Russ hears of this and goes back to Fenris, only to see it in smouldering ruins, because because Horus comes to Lionel Johnson, and unlike Lemon Russ in the real canon, Lionel Johnson has no reason to suspect Horus Lupercal at this stage. So Horus says to him, "Look, we need to bring him back here. We need to lure him back. You need to destroy this planet, so that, you know, we can get Lionel Johnson back. We can get Lemon Russ back from the Eye of Terror." And so he helps Lionel Johnson annihilate Fenris and make it a smouldering ruin, and then he leaves. And so Lionel Johnson waits for Lemon Russ to come back, and Lemon Russ does, and he demands answers from Lionel Johnson, and Lionel Johnson is obviously quite aloof. And he says, "Look, I'm told to bring you back in, and I knew the only way to get you here was to do this to Fenris, or you wouldn't have come. Because, you know, as far as we know, you've been speaking to demons in the Eye of Terror for God knows how long. Our father needs to see you to hear the truth of your words. Because he may yet believe you. I don't. Right? I've not been made aware of anything that you've said to him. That's very important. Lionel Johnson hasn't been made aware of the message that was brought back. So he doesn't know that Horus was, manipulating him. Or had any chance of manipulating him. So Lemon Russ delivers his message directly to Lionel Johnson and says, look, this is what I heard, and I know the truth of these words, because in this setting, the main power of Lemon Russ is he's the truth seeker. You cannot lie to Lemon Russ. If you lie, he'll know straight away. Like, his blade cuts through lies and truth. It just, bang, black and white, lie, truth, and that's what he does. So he says, you know me. You know that I can do this. Like, I can... Even a demon can't hide anything from me. And I'm telling you now, Horus has done this to get me to turn against the Imperium, and I won't. And I won't. And so, Lionel Johnson takes him on his word and says, look, I will go find Horus, and if what you're saying is true, I'll take his head myself. You need to go home and talk to Father. So they split up. And Lemon Russ goes back to Terra and speaks to the Emperor. And by this stage, the heresy is now under full swing, right? So the Emperor knows that Lemon Russ was telling the truth. And it's the only regret that the Emperor has is that, look, we will do something else with the Webway, by the way, later on. The Emperor still needs to stay on the Golden Throne, and we'll get to that when we get to Magnus the Red. But in this alternative canon, but Lemon Russ becomes the watchdog of Terra, right? And he bleeds his legion because I wouldn't have the Blood Angels be at the Siege of Terra in this new canon. The Blood Angels are fighting Khornate demons across the galaxy. And they eventually will make it back so that Sanguinius can make his last stand and his sacrifice against Horus Lupercal, right? But I would actually have Lemon Russ be the watchdog. He takes... he's not on Terra, he's around Terra. In fact, he's on Luna mostly, as does the wolf at the door, essentially, trying to keep away. And the one of the main reasons why Horus doesn't immediately win the Siege of Terra is the beating that Lemon Russ gives him. And we can even move the duel that they have to the Vengeful Spirit right above Terra, right? Before the siege happens in earnest. So, the same thing happens in that, Horus is beaten and bloody, but he nearly dies. But the thing is that obviously Lemon Russ isn't charged by chaos, so he almost definitely dies, right? So he's then taken down to Terra itself to be looked after by somebody, right? And from here on in, his story carries on throughout the Imperium and basically carries on the same way, right? It goes right throughout the same way. But because we've annihilated Fenris, the Space Force have a different look. They are a grey armoured with really dark crimson edging. They are essentially space barbarians. Noble storytellers, truth seekers, barbarians. The wolves at the door is what they are. They're not comedy Vikings. They don't sing sagas and go into drinking contests and anything like that. These are warrior sages. In fact, during the Siege of Terra, the main friend Lemon Russ makes is with Jakatai Khan, for exactly the same reason that their two legions are quite similar and their two outlooks are quite similar. So that's how I would rewrite Lemon Russ, to make him more palatable, less woefully overpowered, and more... I would definitely get rid of all of the stuff with Grey Knights. I think it just breaks the canon and there's no reason to do it. Rather than, oh, Space Wolves are great, look at the Space Wolves, go and collect Space Wolves, right? Like, I don't see any other reason to do it, and it shouldn't have been done. There are other ways to make the Space Wolves really, really powerful without having them break the laws of the, or break the law of the setting itself. So, in a weird way, the main problem I have with Space Wolves is how cool they could be, if Games Workshop allowed them to be cool. The fact of the matter is they're not very cool, because to me anyway, because they're literally just Space Vikings, and a lot of the stuff that they do is very on the nose and cheesy, and I'm not a big fan of that. I would make them more Germanic, I would make them more Russian, I would make them more... In fact, I would have the Death Corps of Krieg be the Death Corps of Fenris. That would be the Imperial Guard Regiment on Fenris. Would be these, like, mental... these mental gas mask wearing dudes who ride out into the chaos waste and just kill things with bayonets, you know, and that could be the regiment from which the reason why the Space Wolves have such a close kinship with normal humans, because they know how brave these dudes are in terms of them being the death corpse of Fenris. So that is what I would do with the Space Wolves. I think they deserve a lot better than what they get. I mean, look at this guy. Look at Logan Grimnar on his stupid sled, man. It's just ridiculous. Like, it's just too much for me. I know that's just my opinion. I know a lot of you will disagree with it, but to me, that's how I feel about Space Wolves. I think they could be 10 times cooler than what they are. Why Logan Grimnar gets to wield a Chaos artifact as his main weapon and not get any sort of repercussion from the Inquisition is beyond me. Again, breaking the law to accommodate these cheesy Space Vikings. So, that is all I have to say about the Space Wolves. I love them as an idea, but they sound like they're written by a 5-year-old, essentially. And I really wish that they were better. I really do. Obviously, I'm going to be in the minority, and I completely understand that, but that's just my opinion. I respect the Space Wolves. I really like their potential as a legion and as a chapter. And to be honest with you, if they were made like how I know they could be made, I'd probably be collecting Space Wolves right now. Shrug. But anyway, that's the Space Wolves. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I wanted to get that one out the way today because the next one's going to be a very gushing video about how much I love the White Scars. So I'll speak to you guys next time, and have a good one.